Hi everyone, how are we doing?
Good.
Let's try that again. Hi everyone, how are we doing?
Good morning, can you hear me? Okay, perfect. All right.
My name is Jill Herb actually. I work at Circus Street. I'm the VP of Client Strategy and Growth. What that means is I lead up accounts very similar to the brands that are sitting here today. We educate commercial teams on the skills and knowledge necessary to operate and win in a modern business world. And I'm joined by Val at McCormick.
Yes. And I like to go with my formal name, Valda, because my parents, I think, went through a great extent to make me unique, right? I was born on Valentine's Day, and instead of Valerie, which would have been a little more common, maybe normal, they went with Valda. And I learned that many years later it had nothing to do with why they named me that. It means heroine of battle.
Yeah, girl.
Who knew?
So interesting. I think they knew that you would have an interesting life and career and path to impact this world. So I like to kick these things off with kind of a quick fire round of questions. And since we're at Snapchat, we're talking about CPG brands, I'll try to keep that on theme. So, what's your favorite condiment?
Hot sauce.
Ooh. What's your favorite viral food?
Canned fish.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay.
It's the tinned era, tinned food fish era. Okay. Most used spice in your cabinet?
Garlic.
Your favorite herb? You don't have to say me.
Today it'll be you.
Thank you.
But thyme.
Okay, and your go-to source for food inspiration?
A lot of Instagram pages. Not necessarily only the big ones, like Food 52 and Food Beast and those types of things, but I follow a lot of smaller pages, particularly the ones that are more, I would say, authentic ethnically. So I'm a big fan of Haitian food, right? So there's some folks that I'm trying to help build their following. I can't even remember the name off the top, but I follow a lot of pages.
Do you go looking to start with an ingredient first, or you're like, I'm in the mood for a certain cuisine, and then you go search?
I'm looking to be inspired. I probably should have also mentioned restaurant brands as well, right? Again, not your typical, but if I travel somewhere and I find something unique, I was recently this summer in Greece and Turkey and Italy, and so I'm following some of the restaurants that I visited there. So they inspire me because there's something different, there's a twist to what I would normally be able to get on a day-to-day basis.
Love that. So while the spotlight's on you, let's talk a little bit more about your experience. You've worked in a variety of consumables, from mangoes to cannabis to now hot sauce. Tell us a bit about your experience just as a marketer with CPG and food and how it's changed since you started.
Yeah, so I'm going to go back a little further because I know that there probably are some Colgate-Palmolive people in the room. So I actually started my career in New York, at Colgate-Palmolive, in fact. And so I think from that, which gave me a really strong global lens into how brands actually act strategically to their advantage, maybe test in one country before they roll out to a new region, etc. From there, my last role in New York was actually with Heineken, another strong global company, and then yes, fast forward to 10 years in Florida, working for startup, one agricultural concern, which is mangoes, which actually is my favorite fruit. So you'll hear a theme from me. I am a very passionate marketer. I tend to not work on things that I'm not passionate about. So when you say, oh my God, how did you go from Heineken to working on mangoes, right, this fruit? I'm like, well, why not? Look at what Avocados from Mexico has done. I'm a big fan of that organization. I know their leader there. So it really is about brand passion. And then fast forward to cannabis. Listen, from a social justice standpoint, I wanted to be a part of the industry that actually brought validation to it. So like I tell people, believe it or not, it is run like every other large organization with professionals, with MBAs, that are CPAs, that are what have you. So what I've seen over the years, though, is we went from a very, I'll call it, linear approach to marketing, right, even in the food space, to now what I say they've kind of brought us into the metaverse Marketers have to almost act, oh, I'm sorry, I've got my back to some people. Marketers almost have to act in, and live and thrive and operate in a multidimensional context, right? I think everyone in here would agree with me on that. It is not as simple as you write a brief and then you execute against that, because as someone I was speaking to earlier, the marketplace is dynamic. The competitive environment is dynamic. You've got indie brands that are popping up in the food space, so bring it back to food. And so how do you respond? It's iterative, right? And you have to stay alert.
Yeah, awesome. So, and you're saying you have to stay alert, you have to stay afloat. When you're working with brands like Frank's hot sauce and French's mustard, how do you take such a legacy brand and make sure that it's staying afloat and being agile with new consumers and also staying true to the consumers that are loyal to you already?
So I like to put everything in context. I get super excited about my role at McCormick. I've only been there about 16 months, right? So when you think of McCormick, the first thing you think about are the dry spices. You think also of vanilla, right? You think of baking during the holidays. The unit that I lead, I'm the commercial lead for our condiments and sauces business, includes recently acquired brands. So the approach that we take, although Frank's is not new per se, it's not necessarily 138 years old, right, like McCormick is. How we stay relevant, it all starts with data. It starts with consumer insights, right? It's also, honestly, I say, get out in the street and see what people are doing and like hang out with Gen Z if you're not Gen Z. I happen to have 3 of them that are my children, right? But I still don't pretend to consider myself an expert, right? They've got friends, there's regionality, right? Coast to coast, north to south. So it's finding what is that uniqueness that your brand can credibly tap into with a consumer that you've sized actually has larger market potential. So, while there's insights and we can all say we know Gen Z loves hot sauce, I happen to know that. There's a lot of hot sauce brands out there, right, to choose from. So why will they choose Cholula? Why will they choose Frank's? There's something unique and special that we're trying to do. So I'm bringing more of that entrepreneurial experience that I had in the last 10 years to bear and combining that with that CPG discipline that I had for 15 years in New York.
You mentioned entrepreneurial mindset. Being an entrepreneur requires taking a lot of risk and also navigating through that risk to make sure that it stays afloat through, seeing an ROI on that or whatever you're trying to activate. When it comes to new trends, new platforms, new products from existing brands, what's your advice or some experiences that you've had in those types of activations and making decisions on where to invest?
I answered a similar question with don't sleep. I kind of don't mean that literally. Colloquially, don't sleep means don't take things for granted. Don't make these grand assumptions. What you won with in the past is not necessarily what is going to carry you forward. The other thing I would say, though, is it's okay to learn fast. And I purposely use learn, not fail. I actually don't believe in failure. You learn from what didn't work. And so maybe it didn't meet the full objective, but you can still learn from that. I can take, for example, I won't name it, but there's a product that we launched, and it didn't meet the original assumptions. I'm like, but what did we learn from it that will fuel future innovation? And I think what we saw was it actually brought in new consumers. So who did buy it was a different demographic than our core, right? And so with that, there's a nugget there that we can work with to figure out what was it about those products that appealed to that new demographic, and then what do we need to change going forward. The other piece of it I would say is humility. I think a lot of times, oftentimes to people who work, which is why I've moved categories, by the way. I've gone from, personal care and beauty to beverages, wine, spirits. I've worked in cannabis. I've worked on commodities. I like that change up because I've seen different business models. I've seen how you actually, how oftentimes there is a base of consumers that you're not even reading, right? So you have your Circana is the name now, but your IRI, your Nielsen, what have you. You have your sort of typical, you've got your bases testing, right? Well, those are the people you actually spoke to. Where's the consumption coming from that maybe isn't in the numbers, right? And that's what newer categories and cannabis is one of those though. It's kind of uncharted territory of how do you actually do this thing, what is the model? I would say the same of mangoes as a commodity. So it's having some humility that you don't know everything. It doesn't matter if you've worked in that category for 15 or 20 years. And it also means stepping away and actually being okay with a new thought, right, on how to approach, because what's there to lose, right? Again, you learn, you don't fail.
It's almost paired off with being really curious as well, and not just taking it as it is, taking the industry, taking the results, the status, your brand. You can innovate if you're thinking about how to, and be curious about how to change things as well. Paired off with that humility to know that you don't know everything.
That's right.
Okay, so what are some of the new types of activations or partnerships that you have taken a risk on? I know that there's a new space in gaming that you guys did a few months ago, as well as there was an interesting partnership with Spicy and Sweet.
Sure. So what she's referring to is during the Super Bowl, Frank's actually activated and had a Fortnite game, right? That was branded. Okay, it's a game, yes. But at the end of the day, I'm on the commercial side, P&L responsibility. We got to sell some hot sauce, right? So while there is certainly a brand impression, there's an equity that we want to resonate with, younger demographics. At the end of the day, we also had a partnership with DoorDash that was folded into that. You're gaming, you're watching the Super Bowl, you're probably eating, right? Because there's a lot of time that's passing. And I think that was the magic of it. And the one thing I want to say, plug from McCormick, is the uniqueness of McCormick as a company is while we are a CPG company, we also have a very large flavor solutions division. And so when we say we're the #1 flavor company in the world, it is a combination of flavor brands that we have across the full spectrum from dry to wet. It's also the restaurant penetration, the partnerships that we have, for example, with other food and beverage companies. And fast forward to the other great example of how we leverage that, right? We worked with, during the summer we have a mustard day, right? We try to get everyone to focus on the category, but think French's first. And so we partnered with Skittles. Probably not something you're going to run out and say, I absolutely, but that you were curious, right? So tapping into that word curiosity. It was by far the strongest PR activation that we have ever had, with 5 billion impressions. I think it actually did go viral, and it exceeded. We did not assume that we would get that type of excitement, but it also drew on nostalgia. Right, so there was actually, some movement of a branded French's Skittles bus that, drove along the East Coast from south to north. It's not, the last stop was in New York City. But it reframed, I think, how people think about French's, certainly for, in terms of combining that flavor profile. And we are seeing, while there is a base consumer that will stay with that classic yellow, French's can deliver flavor in unexpected ways and, just delight. So during the summer, I thought that was really fun, and we were really proud of that.
There's no, rainbow mustard coming out after this part.
I can't really tell you that.
Sorry.
But I did taste them, and they were curiously interesting.
Leave it at that. Check us out next year, July 4th. We'll see. Are there any questions from the audience? Or should I get the mic?
Hi, I'm Martine. I work with Jill at Circus. So you mentioned a little bit about how you guys acquire brands and bring them into the McCormick brand, and also uniqueness and how that's a big focus for you and marketing within your org. Do you oftentimes try to lean into that uniqueness of a specific brand, or do you kind of try to bring them under this big, wider brand strategy umbrella of McCormick? If so, how and also why?
Yeah, so I focus more on the uniqueness of the brand because each of the brands that we have, there is a base of consumers. I'll just talk about our base business, right? That is the lifeblood of us being able to survive year in, year out. But what we do is we look at tentpole moments, and are there opportunities, seasons, for example, right? Where we'll have a campaign, whether it's grilling season, right? Perfect time for you to bring together your dry spices, your mustard, your barbecue sauce, which is also within my portfolio. So, you know, I would say day to day, it's more about that brand and its core, its essence, what is its equity, how will it grow, you know, what unmet needs is it, could it meet? And then seasonally and where applicable, we do more of an umbrella approach. Other questions? Yeah.
Jeff Stewart from the Weather Company. So you mentioned that you look for other Instagram accounts, different restaurants for inspiration for your self-cooking. How is McCormick kind of taking that approach to market and inspiring consumers to work within the kind of McCormick portfolio of products?
Yeah, so great question. So we have, I would say, a multi-channel approach that is very dynamic. Again, always around who are we targeting. So we've got a direct-to-consumer platform, an app, a flavor maker app, where you can actually build for yourself for the week. We also, ensure that in all of our brand activations, right, there's something on site that brings them to the best portal, I'll call it, right, based on that consumer. So it is not necessarily a one-size-fits-all, but we ensure that we know the consumer journey. We work very closely as well with our retail partners. There's an e-com component to everything that we do, right? And then, of course, the entire, social and digital universe that we're operating in. So it really comes down to who we're targeting, where do we need the growth from, and obviously budgets, right? Some brands are a little scrappier than others, and others go very big, all year. So an always-on approach. Yes?
Hi, I'm Sam. I work here at Snap. I run one of our food and beverage teams actually that works with you guys. So thank you so much for being here. First and foremost.
Thank you for having me.
I love the story about French's and the partnerships and the unexpected nature of it with Skittles. When you think about sort of like a limited time offer or innovation product like that, do you see it more as an equity play solely, or do you see it as a recruitment tool for some of those audiences you talked about earlier, like Gen Z? And are you seeing that effect actually happening, like they're retaining them and converting them over into like a more French's product?
Yes, so I would say it is an equity play. Because one of the things that we have the challenge of, and many brands do, is private label, right? So how do they choose French's, not just choose mustard? There has to be something bigger, broader, special, unique, that will encourage you in these inflationary times, right, to pay more. So that's one thing. It's definitely an equity play to really stand out. We're the number one mustard brand, I mean, by far, right? But private label, because people's wallets are tightening, has certainly seen a good amount of growth. But beyond that, I think you asked about the second part of your question again was...
Does it help recruit,
Yes.
to your point, does it help actually recruit Gen Z into becoming core French?
Yeah, I think the beauty of that activation, honestly, which is why I got so excited and how I actually wasn't surprised, I was pleasantly surprised, but I wasn't surprised it went viral, is the nostalgia, right? I almost think, and we haven't done this yet, but we probably need a French's nostalgia page. Like, we need some page, right? Like, my 22-year-old totally gets into things that are way before her time, right? So, I don't know if it's that curiosity or that there's a longing maybe for that more idyllic time that they didn't get to experience because she was born in the year of 9/11 in New York City. Okay, so it's one of those things where I think we really struck a magical, it was magical like a rainbow, a magical chord on that day that for those who always use French's on their hot dog or maybe just put it on a sandwich, right, every single day, could get with that. But then the younger generation was like, oh my God, that's kind of cool, look at that bus. What, that bus went from Atlanta to DC to New York, where is it now? You know, what's going on? So, that, you know, we had a lot of fun with it, but it happened to bridge generations. So that was the magic of this one.
Thank you.
Yes.
Hi, Angela Sobel, Unilever. You talked a lot about authenticity for yourself and following brands. You talked about the importance of targeting. You talked about your D2C app, and then also e-com portion. What are all of those can interplay using data? So what are the top 2 data points or signals that you guys are using to influence your marketing?
Conversion. Conversion of purchase is huge for me, right? So I mentioned about the consumer journey, and it's one thing if they click, they swipe, they like, okay, they share. If you didn't purchase, right, then we didn't fully do our job. So that's one. And then, of course, I would say engagement and then just sharing with the broader community. We do look for expansion of, you know, communities, I'll call it, right? It's not just followers, but on all of these platforms. But for me, it's conversion.
Thank you.
Yes.
We have one, maybe one more? One more.
Yes.
Hi, I'm Lisa Natalia from Venue. You mentioned the consumer experience that you're rolling out on your own platforms and then also the retail partnerships. Can you speak to like how you decide which experience to go where, and maybe some collaborations you're looking at in particular?
Yeah. So it depends. So I'll answer that question related to retail partners, right? Every retailer has a certain, I'll call it a certain stickiness about them, right? I lived in Florida for many years, and Publix, right? You know, the aprons program that they've got, you know that they've got cooking schools, etc. So the tools that we have to work with a Publix versus, for example, an H-E-B are very different versus a Walmart. And so for us, we actually, in some cases, if a retailer, and I actually don't want to go into specific names because some of it becomes proprietary, but if a retailer, for example, has an objective, for example, of being bigger and stronger than Amazon, right? Well, that is a clue then, probably where we need to invest our dollars to ensure that we are a part of that journey and that we're taking full advantage of that, and then we build out everything that we need to win there around that. You know, we understand when you search, it's just like going to a store and are you eye level, are you in that first or second row when somebody types in hot sauce, for example, on Amazon. In another way, I would say, you know, there's often opportunity to, I'll call it co-create from an innovation standpoint based on the unique demographics. I'll also mention, because I did say earlier about who are the consumers that you don't read, right? We also do sell in unmeasured channels. Okay, when you look at the Hispanic community, right, particularly of Mexican origin, there's a lot of product. They cook a lot, right? And so it may not necessarily be read in, you know, all the platforms that you get most of your data from. So how are you activating there? And so with that, I travel. I get out of the office and I go into those markets. I go to Arizona. I go to Texas, right? And I'm observing. So it's the curiosity, it's the staying alert. And I would say each retailer has a different toolkit that we work with. And we very much align to what their strategic priorities are in order to leverage for growth on our brands. Okay, you're welcome.
Thank you so much. I think that's our time.
Okay, thank you all.